Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Conversations on Conversations, where each week we explore a topic to help us all have more powerful conversations with ourselves and others. I am your host, Sarah Noll Wilson, and joining me today are two dear friends. One you've heard me talk about, one you haven't, but you're going to meet him today. But joining me today on the show is my chief of staff, my good friend, my gatekeeper of all things Sarah, Amy Myers, and her husband, Luke Mohlenhoff. And let me tell you a little bit about them and what we're going to be exploring today. We're going to be talking about the joys of having ADHD, as well as supporting loved ones or colleagues with ADHD as well. So let me tell you a little bit about Luke, and then I'll tell you about Amy. Luke Mohlenhoff is a senior vice president at West Bank and manages the residential construction and land development team. He has been with West Bank since 2011 and has over 2 decades of experience in the banking industry. He specializes in residential construction and land development. He actively contributes to professional organizations as an 11-year board member of the Home Builders Association of Greater Des Moines, Iowa, a 10-year board member of the West Bank Corporation Foundation, and more recently as a 2-year board member of CREW Iowa. And for those who are unfamiliar, CREW stands for Commercial Real Estate Women. And that's actually how Luke and I met. So we'll talk about our little cute meet story when we get to that. His motivations to pursue a career in construction and development banking comes from contributions that the specialization has in transforming the Des Moines metropolitan area. He has a particular passion for affordable housing initiatives and making housing more affordable for all, regardless of income level. He has lived in Des Moines for the past 22 years with his wife, Amy Myers, and their cats, Teddy Bear Roosevelt. I didn't realize that's Ted's full name.
Yes,
I only know him as Ted. Okay.
Legal name.
Teddy Bear Roosevelt. I love it. And Chloe Bear Warwick. Also didn't know her last name, and I love it so much. Luke is an avid golfer, and his current golf handicap is mid-range irons. I like it. All right. So my colleague, Amy Myers, she brings over 2 decades of program management expertise to her role as our chief of staff. Her passion for connecting with clients while working together to cross the T's and dot the I's makes her partnership personally rewarding on many levels. She loves a good Excel tracking spreadsheet, and we are grateful for that. Amy's background includes work in public education, government, nonprofit arts organization. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology from Grinnell College, inspiring her lifelong interest in other people's stories and experiences. And here's a super fun fact about Amy. In her free time, she lives vicariously through PBS baking shows and America's Test Kitchen. She enjoys trying new dishes, but believes recipes are only a suggestion. Although her husband and cat may beg to differ. Hashtag, I love that you put a hashtag in your, we've got to keep all of this, Nick. We're not re-recording it. Hashtag olive oil brownie fail. So let's start there. You know, in the spirit of what else should we know about you? Amy or Luke, either of you can take a stab at this. What's the hashtag olive oil brownie fail?
I can give a quick explanation of that, and I want to couch it in the fact that my sister still tells this story to this day, even though it's like literally over 20 years ago that this happened. But this was one of my first jobs out of college, and you're kind of getting to know everybody, and they decide to do an office potluck, and I was like, sure, I'll bring brownies, no problem, easy peasy. You get a box mix, you're good to go. And mind you, growing up, I had years in 4-H, so I know how to sew, I know how to bake. I don't enjoy either one of them. So it was sort of like definitely pushing against the comfort zone. But so I got a Betty Crocker mix, went to mix it up and realized, it calls for, it's super simple, calls for an egg and some vegetable oil. Well, I didn't have any vegetable oil. And I was like, olive oil. This is fine.
Olive oil
is a neutral. It's good for you. It's healthy. It's dark chocolate, and it'll be great. So they came out of the oven smelling kind of like olive oil, and I was like, "Well, they'll be fine as soon as they cool. It'll be great." And then I was like, "Oh, I really don't know this is a good idea." And they finally cooled, and I went to cut them, and I tasted them. I'm like, I am going to go pick up some pre-made cookies from the local grocery store because this is not how I want to introduce myself to my colleagues. So, and that, as I'm telling that story.
Or it's exactly the way you should introduce.
Yes, I should have. Oh, I should have, because then I would have been off the hook for any sort of baked good after that. But it's ironic. We just made this connection. So that's the first story about baking fails. And then I have another story where I tried to make, for whatever reason, upside down pineapple upside down cake from scratch. And I had to call my friend. I was like, hey, can you use evaporated milk instead of sweetened condensed milk? She's like, absolutely not. And so then I called my mom and I'm like, what do I do? She's like, well, what box
very
mix
different
are you making?
Textures.
Yes, exactly. And very different sweetness, all of it. And so I called my mom, my go-to, and I was like, okay, so here's the situation. I don't know why this isn't turning out. And she's like, well, what box mix did you use? And I was like, box mix? I made this from scratch. And my mom goes, well, that's your first problem. Like, you don't make anything from scratch. So I have had 2 solid swings and misses, and I'm just good with, like Molly's cupcakes from here on out. So yeah. So anyway, those are
I love when you learn something new about people. Luke, do you want to weigh in on the olive oil brownie fiasco or Amy's cooking in any way before we hop into this conversation?
Well, as a kid, my brother and sister and I, we made my parents a homemade anniversary cake, and we did it from scratch. And then we tried to make frosting from scratch, and it said confectioner's sugar. And we figured granulated sugar, confectioner's sugar, it's both
Must
sugar.
Be the same thing.
Yeah.
Does not make very good frosting. It does cave in the top of a homemade cake, especially if you pour it on hot and then instantly crystallizes. And it's hard to run through a piping bag and write happy anniversary. It mostly just tastes disgusting and looks even worse. So,
oh, man.
Yeah.
I love that this is what we're talking about. You were.
We were,
well, especially because Sarah, you are like a baking aficionado now. So this is.
Oh, but let me share my story because I have a good fail and it'll be quick and then we'll hop into it. I made a cheesecake for my sister Becky's birthday a number of years ago and I forgot to add the sugar. And when my dad took a bite, he went to go get the table sugar and was pouring it on. And I was like, Dad, it's a cheesecake. My God, you don't need to. He was like, it just, and he's so polite and nice. He's like, it just needs a little extra sugar. And then I tried it and it was just a cream cheesecake. There was no sugar, just vanilla, eggs, and cream cheese.
Yes.
So it was good.
Wow.
It happens.
So the reason that I brought these 2 on the show actually started with some conversations Amy and I had because as some of you who have been listening to our show for a while, I'm very open about challenges I have, whether it's from a neurodivergent perspective, mental health perspective, and I've shared that I'm a late adult diagnosed ADHD. And one of the things that has been just an incredible gift to me is having someone like Amy support me. But then we've had some clients who have some neurodivergent folks. And we were joking, like, she's got a lot of experience supporting people. And then we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have Luke come on, talk about his experience and just talk about what does it look like to support somebody with who has neurodivergence. So Luke, I want to start with you, and I want to start with talk to me about your ADHD journey because it's part of our Cute Meat story. Like
it is,
so.
Yeah.
So take us back to that crew session.
Yeah, and I can go back really far. This is something that I've wondered about probably since I first became aware as a kid of ADHD as an idea. And I don't remember exactly when that was. It was probably sometime in middle school. But when I heard the expression, and especially how it typically is seen in boys, it's usually the kid who just can't stay in his desk and he's just constantly running around and fidgeting and doing all those things. And that was never me, I think in part because until high school, I was always in the same school building where my dad was a teacher.
Oh.
And so acting out was definitely not something that would go over, especially in a Lutheran school.
Yeah.
Where they still had a paddle down in the principal's office.
Yeah. So corporal punishment.
I knew how to stay in my desk, but I was definitely a kid who would take my pen apart and put it back together and take it apart and put it back together and spiral bound notebooks, take the spiral spring out and then twist it back in. And so a lot of fidgeting like that. In high school, I was the kid that, more than one time was threatened with someone wanting to beat me up because I was staring at them in the lunchroom, and
Sure.
I wasn't staring at anyone. I was just spaced out. The number of times I would realize in college, I could sit down for an hour and a half or 2 hour lecture class, and all of a sudden everyone was getting up and leaving. And I'd look down at my notebook and I would have one sentence of notes from when the lecture first started, and the rest of the notebook was completely blank, and maybe there was a bird out of the window, and I never really thought about it because I always got really good grades. I think I just figured, well, this class was really boring. If the class was more engaging, I would have probably paid attention more, but thankfully I had good friends who would let me photocopy their notes for those classes. But always having things like that happen. And I think for me, because I was always a high achiever, talking to anybody about the problem and saying, hey, I think something's wrong here. I really struggle to focus all the time. You don't get a whole lot of sympathy when you're getting good grades or you're doing well at a job, and it looks like what are you complaining about? You're successful at especially academic things and employment skills. What's the big deal? And never realizing that all the time that I was spending that other people didn't. I always assumed that, well, that's why I get good grades and they don't. That's why I get promoted and other people don't. It's because I'm putting in this time and they just aren't willing to do it. And until I was diagnosed with ADD and put on medication, realizing that I was putting in countless hours and needless amounts of time and stress and anxiety that other people didn't do because it wasn't necessary at all. And it was a journey.
What was that moment like for you when you did get diagnosed? I mean, it's interesting because it makes sense, with your dad, the presence of your dad, that creates an incredible amount of external pressure. And I appreciate that point you're talking about, because that can be really common when you are a high achieving person. It can be easy to not realize that you have challenges, and I feel like so many people I talk to, they were really good, like A- students who always felt like they could be the B+ students. Like, I'm a good student. I always felt like I could be a really great student. And so what was that like for you, Luke, when you got that diagnosis? And then Amy, then after he shares, I want to hear from you. What was that experience like as his partner who has known him for years and years?
The diagnosis wasn't very surprising. The real surprise was what the medication did for me. I had no idea what to expect. And this goes to really our meeting at a crew event. And when I've told you that you've saved my life, I truly mean that. And I don't know if I mean my career, if I mean that I'm probably going to live a lot longer because having the anxiety no longer such an overbearing presence in my life has been a night and day experience. The mental health struggle and not realizing the extent of how bad things were. I truly can't say how much that changed. And specifically what it was hearing you speak about your own neurodivergent challenges in front of a group of people. I'm thinking back, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah,
so
it would have been like just starting to get out there. It was like 2017. I think it was 2017 or early 2018 when I first went on my own.
It was early. It was I bet that this lunch, there were probably at least 50 people there. And I remember thinking, here's this here's this business owner, this entrepreneur who's left corporate America and gone out on her own. And she's starting off this presentation in front of a group of people who can be very influential and either open or close doors for her. Mm-hmm. And she's starting off talking about struggles with ADHD and anxiety, and that just beautiful honesty of that. I just remember leaving that thinking, I've wondered about this for 35 years of life, approximately, maybe longer. And I've never had the courage to talk to my doctor about it and give voice to just, to get tested and have somebody say, no, you're right to be a high level performer. That's just very stressful. And if you're not built for that, maybe you should consider something less stressful. Or, yes, absolutely, you do have ADHD, or in my case, ADD. I don't test very highly at all in the hyperactivity component, but in the 9 spectrums, I'm at a very high level in 8 of the 9, and the hyperactivity is the only one that I'm not.
Yeah.
And then getting treatment for that and seeing what that would mean for my life. And that was a springboard to decide to take action on my own and not wait for somebody else to save me or talk me out of it. Because I think there were times that I may have thrown it out there to people, and it was usually played down and poo-pooed as, what are you talking about? How can you possibly do the things that you've done and have this. And even after the diagnosis, there were people like, yeah, are you sure you really need to be on medication? Or, we don't necessarily see this in you. And this is where Amy can usually jump in and go, well, you don't live with him.
Yeah. And to that point, even still, it's a common challenge that gets dismissed and minimized. It is misunderstood, or people will be like, I'm just so ADHD. Mm-hmm. And it's like, are you? Like, maybe you are. I don't know. But are you? Or, because to your point, and I think that's something we've talked about on previous podcasts, is the relationship between ADHD and anxiety is very strong. And many people will get diagnosed with anxiety disorders, not realizing that what's actually driving it is the ADHD. So Amy, I want to make sure we hear from you. What was that experience like for you when, Luke was finally diagnosed? Because I'm thinking about my own experience of like people like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, could you have clued me in? Yeah. I think it's always interesting to look at it in retrospect, because like the clues were there, but they were never all aligned. Like the dots were never connected until Luke actually got the diagnosis. And I'm sure that's a common experience. It's like, oh yeah, in isolation, this particular thing that happens a lot was just that, or this one. But when you put them all together and you see a pattern, you're like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. That's what or what he's managing. And truthfully, I do think of it a lot similar to how I think of the pandemic, of pre-pandemic and after March 2020. Like I think of it pre-diagnosis and now with the diagnosis, because it just, everything made a lot more sense. Like there were things that just not only made more sense, but also I think coming from a standpoint of wanting to be a supportive partner, but also being frustrated sometimes, like both of those things can be true at the same time, realizing that a lot of these frustrations are just as frustrating for him, if not more. So it wasn't something that was happening in addition to our relationship. It was part of what he's managing, neurodivergence, that is impacting everything. So it just, I feel like it just made me maybe take a step back and be a little more empathetic to the fact that this is not an intentional thing. This is a biological thing that Luke is managing, I'm supporting, and our relationship is managing as well. So it really was like a light bulb.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, also it was such a gift to have him actually take that leap to get the diagnosis and to get tested, because even along the way, I know that there have been steps of, well, talk to so-and-so, then you have to talk to so-and-so, then you have to go to the next level. Like, it's not been just a one and done easy diagnosis.
Right.
So
No.
to see somebody committed to doing that because they know that they just trust that there's something going on. And to have some answers has been a huge gift. I mean, I really do feel like it's been one of those mile markers in our relationship, like the before and the since. And actually, I don't know that Luke and I have talked about it in that way.
Oh, I love it. I really appreciate how you gave language, Amy, to the idea of like, it can be real frustrating to live with and work with neurodivergent people because we don't operate, our brain doesn't work in the same way. And I know that. I know that from loved ones in my life who have, who are married to neurodivergent. And it can feel like, are you doing this on purpose? And I really appreciate that you named that. As frustrated as you are, that's frustrating for us, right? When you realize like there's things I want to do and why can't I just do them? Or, or you set out to accomplish some task and then you get distracted by something else. And Luke, I'm curious to hear from you. I know for me on my journey, and, and Nick's listening into this and he will attest to this without doubt. But when I was first realizing and understanding this, as being part of, one of the biggest challenges I had was overcoming shame around it. And it wasn't shame about the ADHD like diagnosis. It was the shame about the ways I felt like I was falling short. I couldn't keep track of notes. I couldn't keep track of client conversations. I couldn't remember people's faces. I couldn't remember their names. And so I had to really work on accepting that my brain was different and realizing I needed compensating measures, right, to set me up for success. And I was just curious, like, how does that resonate for your experience, or how was it different?
I have not ever defined it in a way that I guess I would use shame. And I think the reason that I don't is because for me, it was panic or terror. On the low end, it was always an underlying, brooding level of anxiety, just wondering when the next mistake was going to happen, the next forgetful moment. And so it really wasn't shame. And in the moments of sheer terror and panic, and that's where I can say that if people who joke about it, and I would say, if you really think you are, get tested. But if not, I always have a couple of stories that I tell people that I say, here's two examples. And if these resonate with you, absolutely get tested. And if these don't resonate in any way, you probably just occasionally forget things everybody does. And the first thing is I started trying to organize myself. In the morning at work, I would write down on a Post-it note the three things that I wanted to accomplish today in order.
Yeah.
And I would do that at the office before I'd go grab a cup of coffee from the coffee maker. And I remember one time in particular, I came back and the note was gone. And what I always ask people, I've spoken about this in public only once before, I said, and I use the word normal because for me, I go, what would a normal person do? And almost everybody goes, well, just rewrite the note. You just did it 2 minutes ago. And I go, yeah, and I knew what was on the note. But for someone with ADD and the corresponding anxiety, the fact that you have managed to lose a Post-it note in 2 minutes and have no idea where it is strikes to the core of, if I can screw up something this basic, I surely can't work on a $10 million loan presentation today. I just can't do it. I have to find the Post-it note first. And spending an hour or more and eventually finding the Post-it note stuck to the back of, I don't remember if it was on the back of a piece of paper, if it fell off and it was on my shoe. It doesn't really matter where I found it, but that finding of the note became far more important than recreating the note and just getting on with my day. It just struck to the core of my value as a person, my competence. I could not focus to work until I found that Post-it note. And the second one was I was having what I now know was a pretty bad panic attack. It started early in the day at work. My arm was getting tingly. My neck was getting, what most people would say, or you were having a heart attack.
Well, that's a heart attack.
And yeah. And instead of stopping everything, calling 911, telling my boss, and getting some medical attention, I spent the rest of the day getting everything organized at my desk, and then calling Amy as I drove myself to the ER, telling her I wasn't sure what time I might be home. Because my thought process was, if I am dying of a heart attack today, or if I am going to be out of the office for several weeks or a month or more as I recover from open heart surgery, I surely want people to think that I was very good at my job and well organized, and that someone could just step in and pick up where I had left off, because I wouldn't want people to think I was a disorganized, incompetent person. And I laugh about it now, but I sit back and think, what if I was really having a heart attack?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's also, like what you speak to. And so first, Luke, I really appreciate you sharing that and sharing so honestly, because that, when you're working and existing in a neurotypical world, it's, because that's the thing for me is like, it's not a disability. It's just a difficulty because of the system we work in. Right. Like, and as you're talking, I'm like, I would hate for somebody to walk into my office right now and see all my piles of paper and unopened mail and be like, why doesn't she open her mail? I'll be like, I don't know. That's why I have Amy. But that constantly wanting to present, because we're aware of how much, we're just aware of dropping balls. We're aware of no amount of focus can help us. So one of the things that, people don't know, for people who've been following my journey a while and the team's journey, as you hear Luke talk about the story of how we cross paths, that's actually how eventually I crossed paths with Amy. And so I have Luke to thank for bringing Amy to our world. And so Amy, one of the things that I want to make sure we spend some time on today is, and I want to look at this through a couple different lenses, but as somebody who lives and supports a partner during non-work hours, and as somebody who lives and supports a colleague during work hours, what are some of the things that you have found to be that was valuable for you to understand so that you could show up differently? And also I want to talk about strategies, what we've learned in our working together.
Yeah. So I think the most important realization I had is that, and I think this is maybe a universal realization, that it's not me. It's not personal. It's not anything to do with our relationship or our partnership as colleagues, that this is not something that I can do anything to change. What it is a clue to me of how somebody is walking through life. And so it's a little bit of a sign of, okay, so this is one piece that you now know about them. How are you going to use that to inform how you show up for them? So with Luke, for example, I say it was like a light bulb moment, because it was like, oh yeah, okay, so the assumptions I made, or the way that I communicated, or the way that we tried to partner on things, that those were not set up for success from the beginning. because first of all, assumptions are inappropriate, but secondly, any strategies were going in based on inaccurate information. So I think having that realization that it's not about me, but also just the reminder that, I mean, I know you hear the saying, you never know what someone else is going through. Like, you know, the person who blew by you on the highway, they might be on their way to an emergency or something. Absolutely. Every day. I do not know. And I will not know. There's no way that I can know what either of you are living day to day. Even when you are open and share, it's still not my lived experience. And so just that reminder to take a step back and, because as a firstborn and as a fairly I like my chart, I like my to-do list, let's check it off. I can jump to let's fix this, let's troubleshoot this. And that's not appropriate. It's absolutely not appropriate to try to manage somebody. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to be a partner, to walk with you in whatever way that is. And if that also means taking a step back from that partnership because you need to do X, Y, or Z in your own way on your own, that's the support that I give them. So I just really feel like it's been a huge, in an interesting way, it's expanded my view, not only of each of you as individuals, but also just like the world in general. Like, holy crap, I make a lot of assumptions about what I think I know about even my own interactions with people. And those aren't accurate. Those are just my assumptions. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did beautifully. And it made me realize, as somebody who's on the receiving end of that support, that is what makes you a really effective partner in this. And, you know, I assume Luke experiences, or I hope you experience it in the same way. Like, I hope I don't get all of the good stuff from Amy and then she's like, whatever, you got to do your own thing, Luke. But it, you know, I really appreciate how you articulated that, you know, I want to fix it, so let's just do this, instead of recognizing there are times when I might need to do it differently. There are times when what worked once isn't going to work another time because of where we are. And that's one of the things I would just say, anyone who's listening, if you are struggling with a form of neurodivergence like ADHD, autism, Tourette's, if you're supporting somebody, whether it's a family member, loved one, or a team member, I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn for myself is it's going to be an ongoing experimentation. And that's one of the things, Amy, I appreciate about how we've navigated is there are tasks where I do defer to how you manage it, so you can manage it more effectively than me trying to, right? Like our task list, but how we adjust it is every week we go through it and you walk me through it. And so I can see it. And then, right. So it can be managed in your way, but it also can be accommodated for how I will learn. Luke, I'm curious to hear from you. One of the lessons for me, now I haven't been able to find medicine that has been helpful, is my therapist, and Amy's heard me talk about this a lot, is she always would say, you have to figure out the Sarah manual, that what works for you is going to be very different than works for other people. So things like body doubling, like spending time working with Amy where she's working on something else and I'm working, it can be really effective. Having, external pressure. What are some of the things you have found over the last couple of years that have worked for you that are a part of your Luke manual of being able to, be successful with ADHD?
I think a couple of things is knowing what to ask other people, sometimes what not to do. Amy knows, like, if I leave the burner on the stove and leave the kitchen, she should definitely turn it off. If she opens the refrigerator and for some reason
I'm laughing because I may have.
If my cell phone or
I just feel
wallet
very seen.
Is in the refrigerator, grab it and hand it to me. But if my wallet is on the kitchen counter and not on my dresser in the bedroom, don't move it from the kitchen counter to the bedroom without asking me. Don't try to help me, because as someone who struggles to remember things, when I'm pretty sure I left my wallet on the kitchen counter and it's not there, I will did I drop it outside? Did I leave it at work? Did I put it in the refrigerator? Like, and any of that second guessing just spirals, and that panic and feeling of incompetence is absolutely huge.
I was just going to tag on to that, because I know we've had that conversation a couple different times, and I wanted to kind of address it or comment on it from the context of what you just shared, Sarah, about supporting people either in your personal life, as colleagues, team members. Luke telling me that, like, please don't move that, even if you know that I'm going to probably want it somewhere else, because that is panic inducing to me, or that makes me wonder, okay, what happened here? That is me trying to first of all, I appreciate that, because I would not have known that had you not shared that. And it's also another reminder to me that the way I do things, which used to be, oh, okay, well, let's fix this, let's take care of this, is not appropriate. It's not appropriate for me to try to put things back where he's going to need them. That's his right to take that and figure that out eventually. So I just wanted to tag on that what I thought might be helpful in the moment was actually much more harmful than just letting it alone.
Well, and what I love about having this conversation with the two of you, and this is, part of, it's fun when we can have these kind of dynamics, is, it's Luke's courage and willingness to share that, and then it's your courage and willingness to hear that. Because it could be so easy for people to be like, oh God, okay, or whatever, or get defensive or deflect or whatever. And maybe it took a little bit to get to that place, but that's part of this navigating being. I mean, this is true of any relationship, right? How do we navigate with each other? That there has to be this courage to say, here's what I actually need. And what you don't realize is that when I think I've put it somewhere and it's moved, that actually causes me an incredible amount of stress. And then for you to receive that and go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Okay, like I'm gonna work to honor that. So I love that modeling that you two are bringing to all of us of like, what does it look like in practice? Luke, what else? What's one more thing on your manual?
I never picked up on this when I was younger, and this was one of the things when you try to self-diagnose, you fail quite a bit, and the internet is The internet didn't come out until I was almost done with college, so you couldn't do a lot of research on your own. But one of the superpowers of ADHD, and I heard about this recently, I go, oh yeah, this is 100% true, is you also have the ability to hyperfocus at times. If you are really into a deadline, a major term paper, I don't know if you experienced this at all when you wrote your book. But Amy's seen me do this before, where I will start a task and almost nothing is capable of breaking my attention away from that task. And when you're in those moments and can really take advantage of them, if that means you eat lunch at a weird time, or maybe you stay up really late doing something, and, honor those times when you have them, because most people, even people without ADHD, can't go 10 straight hours with barely, taking a bathroom break and getting a sip of water and skipping eating, to just have 10 straight hours of just high speed, high functioning, getting things accomplished. I mean, take advantage of it when it happens, because it is magic. It really is.
Well, and I think, and I assume maybe that's something that you've learned to with both of us, because there might be times when you're like, you're answering emails really late. You're supposed to be off. You're supposed to be, I was like, yeah, but I couldn't focus at all today, but now I'm in it. Right.
Yeah,
let me loose, and there's that recognition of when you get into that flow state, it's so great. And it's so exhausting when you're not able to be in it when you want to other times.
Yeah. I think that's where, again, just another great reminder that it's not my job to drive this. It's my job to support you as you're doing what you do in the best way, because you know what's best for you. And like, I know you and I, Sarah, have had the conversation about if you're checking your emails while on vacation. And I know Luke and I have had a similar conversation, like, okay, so I just kind of check in once in a while. Like when I see the first one, like, how's it going? Are you wanting to do email on vacation, or are you wanting me to like try to help you not do email? I mean, so essentially, rather than assuming what that answer is, asking the question, because in my mind, I'm like, heck no, I'm tapped out. So this person obviously doesn't want to do this. No, that's incorrect to assume anything. So like asking, because even Luke and I have had that same conversation of, okay, so are you going to check email? Like, what do you need to do to make sure that you are in the best spot? And so I think, Sarah, whether it's with you or Luke, whether it's with you, I hope that what I'm trying to do is show up in a way that supports whatever you want to do, not me imposing how I think this should be done, because that's absolutely inappropriate.
Well, and there are times when well, I mean, or maybe not as effective. I don't know that it's inappropriate, but it may not be as effective, right? Like, but there are also times from the standpoint of, that I'm asking you, like, Sarah, Nick does this too. Like if I'm with family or we're on vacation or something, and I'm in my phone, and he can tell I'm on email. He'll be like, "Is everything okay?" And that's his cue to be like, "Is everything okay?" Or did you just get into an autopilot of responding to your emails?
That's a great point.
And that's part of it too. And that's something I know you and I've navigated and negotiated is there are times when I do need you to draw that line for me, because it's too hard for me to draw it myself. Whether it's like, okay, well, I'm in a car for 7 hours. I got nothing else to do. Like this at least is something. But then it'll be like, you'll lovingly be like, are you still in the car? Do you need to be answering this email? And, and one thing that I want to say is, this is a team sport existing in this life together, right?
Yeah,
and how do we show up for each other? And, I definitely want to give some props to Amy. Like I've had clients who've worked with me pre-Amy, and they've noticed such a change in my ability to be able to do the work that I need to do because she's helping me, with the work that I struggle with. And so like, Luke, what would you want somebody in your life, whether it's a coworker, a spouse, family member, friend, what would you want them to know about what it's like for you navigating ADHD? Or what do you feel like maybe they don't always know?
I think the biggest thing is that I'm much more present than I was before. Even when Amy wanted to respond to me talking about, leaving my wallet in the refrigerator, the old me would have completely wanted to just not even acknowledge that she had spoken, because I had other thoughts in my head that I wanted to share. And if I didn't get those out, I may completely forget about them. Or Sarah, you may have taken the conversation in a different direction, but it would have been very important for me to go back to that thought and wedge it in there, even if we were beyond it, because just being able to consciously remember that and present it, just grasping that was so important for reasons that I don't know if I could even possibly articulate, but I did not converse well with people. I was not good at moving on in conversations if I didn't get to share something that I needed to get to. I feel like I'm a very different person, and a lot of people might not even notice that difference because they don't spend as much time with me as Amy does. there's a lot of things that have changed for me that I think make me a better coworker, better with my clients, better in my relationship with Amy and with my friends. And none of them might even realize that. A lot of it is inwardly knowing the changes. And, and then just trying to move past the regret of why didn't I speak up and advocate for myself sooner. I think of how difficult, especially college was, until I managed to get a roommate who, in his own goofball way, and he used it to try to help, but I think would basically just, you're not going to study all night. He would just basically make me put the books aside and do something else. And I loved and hated him for it at the same time, but there's so much of my life that would have been different had this been diagnosed a lot sooner. But that's okay too, because I've still had a very great life, and it's been very rewarding, and I've been successful in a lot of areas, despite some major challenges that only in retrospect can I realize how much of it was a biological cause, and not just, being convinced that I had a better work ethic than other people.
What I wanted to honor is like how common that I feel that every single person I've talked to who has been diagnosed later in life had said something to that effect of, man, this was so hard and it didn't need to be, and not dwelling on it, but just honoring that. And I think that's important for people who maybe have never experienced being diagnosed with, whether it's a neurodivergence or a mental health issue, or right. And realizing, oh, my whole life now makes so much sense, that there can be a little bit of a grief, not only for you, but also for your partner. And Amy, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. Or just what's coming up for you, Amy, as you're hearing Luke talk.
I think
about
it's interesting to hear Luke's perspective on that, because we haven't actually talked too much about how he's, other than the things that are more obvious of, like, very few times now does he tell me, oh, I forgot my keys, could you grab them for me? That's like no longer happening. But to be made aware of the fact that he feels like he's an entirely different person. And I don't see that. I see behaviors that are a little bit different, but it's interesting when I'm trying to reconcile, like, well, we've been together, 23, 22 years. Like, this diagnosis came within the last 5 years. So what does that mean? Like, the person that you were before, there's still that core person carried through. And when I think about, like, boy, what would you have been like? What would our relationship have been 20 years ago after you'd already been diagnosed? Like, it's just a thought experiment, but it also makes me think of an imagery of you were wearing this heavy fur coat in the middle of the winter, the same person walking, or in the middle of summer, and the same person walking through, and then you got the chance to take it off, and you're still the same person underneath, but now you're just living life in a much more comfortable way, and you're like, okay. And we have done a lot of work. Like, therapy. Luke and I have committed to trying to be better partners for each other, and better, like, showing up better for ourselves. So I know that it hasn't been easy, but I also know that, like, to me, I don't think that he's a different person. I think that he's Luke, then there's been the diagnosis, and then there's Luke with the diagnosis, and just, it's been very consistent for me. So I think that speaks a lot to your character, Luke.
Luke, do you want to respond to your wife? And now I'm just like a bystander in this conversation between two amazing people. This
is why I know I use the word regret, and I think it's more I just wonder. But I don't regret it, because if I had been diagnosed as a high school kid, Amy and I may have never met.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have no idea what direction my life would have gone in had I been treated and what I would have done for a career. I just don't know. And so I figure, I'm lucky that I have the life that I do, and that Amy is a part of my life, and that I wouldn't want to. There's so many things in life, even traumatic experiences, I wouldn't want to undo, because I figure they all make me who I am today. And the biggest thing for me now, and the reason that I was willing to do this podcast today, and that I've spoken about this before, actually in front of the same crew group that you spoke in front of, was that if someone else has not yet gotten the diagnosis and is concerned about themselves or a loved one in a mental health issue, to please seek out help, because there's no time machine. You can't go back and undo things, and no matter what's happened to you, there's going to be things that you're going to be a stronger person, a better person, or the miracles that you do have in your life may have never happened if all the traumatic things didn't. But if you're getting out of bed every day and you're struggling with something that is just wearing you out, and that's what Amy didn't see, is that I can look great from the outside, and now I'm much better on the inside. Before, I was a big panicked disaster on the inside, and not wanting to share that even with someone, even with my partner, who I know loves and cares about me very much, because the level of panic was, what does this mean? Do I just have to walk away from a career? And if I do, what does that mean for the rest of my life from a career standpoint? What does that mean for my relationship if I am not able to have a job with any sort of mental demands on it because I can't emotionally handle it? That was all going on in my head for a very long time. Before I even met Amy. How do I navigate life, and what does it mean for my relationships with whoever my partner is, with my family, with colleagues? If there's something broken inside of me that is, I don't even want to give voice to it, and for whatever reason, I'm not seeking diagnosis or treatment, but I'm going to sleep every night and getting up every day, and it's there. And some days it's very muted. Some days it's right there in my face, but it's always there. And now with treatment, it's rarely there. And that's the thing for me. Everyone's going to have anxiety and fears at some point. I mean, that's a natural human thing, but when it's just there every single day, at some level, it just wears you out. And when you're afraid to let people know, it wears you out even more.
Yeah. It's the, going back to that imagery that Amy, you shared of like, it's wearing the fur coat or the heavy coat in summer. It's like, well, I can still move around. So I love that invitation of, to our friends who are listening to this, you're going to be your best advocate, whether it's in getting diagnosed, whether it's working with a provider, whether it's communicating with your partner, your friends, your family member. I appreciate you both so much. And
thank you. I appreciate you.
And this conversation. And so, okay. So in the spirit of you all being first time guests, then you need to answer our question that we ask every first time guest. So the question we ask everyone is, what is a conversation you've had with yourself or someone else that was transformative?
The conversation that I've had with myself comes from the therapy that I started at the beginning of the pandemic, when my anxiety, like a lot of people's with the pandemic, really went to a whole new level. And over the course of working with a therapist, having that conversation with myself of, this anxiety is actually here to protect me. It's not here for me to fight. It's not here for me to manage or put in a box. It's here as my little co-pilot meant to protect me in a dangerous situation. And I can say, thank you. You're welcome to sit here. I do not need you right now, but I appreciate that you want to be here to protect me. And just, I continue to have that, like, that mental shift in my head of telling myself, it's okay that you have these concerns. That's totally normal. It's totally, and I don't want to say normal because that's not, I'm trying to get away from using that word, but it's understandable why this is coming up.
It's a human experience.
Yes, exactly. But just the conversation with myself that, like, you don't have to fight, like, drop that rope, hug that bear, whatever the phrases that you want to use. Yeah. And I mean, it was powerful. It was like life changing. And I continue to, I have it written down and laminated because that's how I roll. And it's a little bookmark. And, like, you know, you can sit here. You're welcome to sit on the bench with me, but, you know, don't need you to do anything right now. So yeah, that's just an internal conversation that's been transformative.
Yeah, I love it. What about you? What about you, Luke?
I remember seeing a child therapist when I was probably in second or third grade. And the last therapy session we had was, he pretty much said, you're not the only kid that deals with this. There's lots of other kids that in different ways are experiencing the same thing. And that feeling that I wasn't alone, even if things weren't how I wanted them to be, just knowing that this was a shared experience, even though it was a traumatic experience, made me feel a lot better. And it's something that I've gotten from any therapist that I've ever met with in some way, shape, or form. And I know that's why I'm willing to talk about this with other people. I feel that's why you do the work you do, why you do this podcast, is not feeling like you're alone. And the times that I've struggled the most, you know, even before I got diagnosed, was going back into that closed room and shutting the door and isolating myself and being convinced that this was something that I had to do on my own, that I couldn't share with other people, that I couldn't connect with other people, that I needed to figure out or just deal with, because, you know, people who get a lot in life, you know, that's you're making a choice to make, you know, you're living a hard life, and there's benefits to that, that it's a choice, instead of actually realizing that maybe it's not a choice. Maybe this is a shared experience. And I've met so many people, and every single one of them, when they talk about their, especially mental health challenges, it's welcoming other people in and being willing to share, and then getting that help and support. And maybe the help and support doesn't come from the people that you most wish it did. Maybe it comes from people that you never would expect would be there to support you, but there is always at least one other person out there who's going to help you. They're going to get it. You will be so much better off by seeking that help.
I love it. What a beautiful way for us to end. If people listen to this and they want to connect with you, both of you, what's the best way for people to connect with you and reach out?
They can email me at amy@sarahnollwilson.com. I'm happy to field any questions, share any thoughts, give any suggestions if somebody does have a colleague.
We're very open book on how we work together. So Luke, if people want to connect with you, how do you recommend?
Yeah, I'll send you a personal email, because I really do. I feel it's so important if this resonated with somebody and they just want to reach out and say, hey, you know, is this common? Does this feel right? You know, that support is, you know, if this helps one person, And if they need to email me or have a cup of coffee and talk about it, it's, I'm so blessed to have, the pre and post diagnosis me. And if someone else gets anything from that, it might not be the person going through it. It might be someone who is in Amy's seat and saying, hey, is there something I could maybe tell my partner that, might make them willing to get some help. I might not have the right thing to say, but even just saying, hey,
just listen. The
fact that you even care and are worried about them, just let them know that in a way that's, it doesn't have to be invasive or pushy, but say, hey, I heard this guy, listen to Sarah's podcast. Maybe you'll get something, maybe you'll get something out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely always interested in hearing insights from people who are in Luke's shoes or your shoes, Sarah, to say, hey, I know you're somebody who wants to support in a helpful way, or not helpful, but a loving partnership kind of way. Here's what you might want to think about. I mean, again, absolutely love to hear that.
And these are just two great humans you all should connect with. So we'll be sure to share their contact information in the show notes. Luke, Amy, Luke, thank you for being amazing. Thank you for coming on the show. And Luke, thank you for your courage. And Amy, thank you for your courage as well.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. It's the least I could do to give back to you.
Our guests this week have been two of my dearest friends, Luke Mohlenhoff and Amy Myers. And I think it's just so powerful for us to talk about these topics that impact our relationships, whether we realize it or not. And one of the things that I'm holding on to that Luke shared was that idea of sometimes when people think they're being helpful can actually increase the anxiety. When he was telling the story about, don't move my wallet, that was something that I resonated with, and I didn't realize. And then with Amy, and I get to experience her grace and compassion and understanding and empathy every single day, is just realizing how does she show up in a way to best support and serve what we need and how we need it. I say it over and over again. I don't know where I would be without having Amy in my life, and she's amazing. And we do want to hear from you. So let us know what resonated, what came up for you, and we'll be sure to pass along your notes to Luke and Amy. You can reach out to us at podcast@sarahnollwilson.com. Again, that's podcast@sarahnollwilson.com. And I read and respond to every email that we get. So we'd love to hear from you. And if you like the show and you want to support us, there's two ways you can do it. First, if you haven't already, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show in your preferred podcast platform. This helps us be able to increase exposure and continue to have great conversations like we did with Luke and Amy today. Another way you can support us is through financial contribution by becoming a patron. You can go to patreon.com/conversationsonconversations, where your financial support will 100% go to the team that makes this show possible. Speaking of which, let's give the team of the podcast some love. So to our producer, Nick Wilson, our sound editor, Drew Knoll, our transcriptionist, Becky Reinert, our marketing consultant, Jessica Burge, and the rest of the Snowco crew. We couldn't do it without you. And just a big wholehearted thank you again to Luke and Amy for joining us today. That, my friends, is another episode of Conversations on Conversations. Thank you so much for tuning in and showing up for yourself, for us, and those in your world. And remember, when we can change the conversations we have with ourselves and others, I do believe we can change the world. So till next week, please be sure to rest, rehydrate, and we'll see you again soon.